To the Val and Val show, where conversation is art, art, art. Conversation is art, conversation is art. You should chime in, ain't no telling what to spark on the Val and Val show. Ain't no telling the Val and Val show. You know, ain't no telling where we go on the Val and Val show. Ain't no ceiling, cause the art of conversation is the flow. It's that creativity available when we speak, available in our homes, available in the streets. We just trying to get it sparking and take it a little deeper. Keep it casual while fireside chatting with our people. Yeah, we take it a little deeper. It get hot when we fireside chatting with our people. Cause conversation is art, conversation is art. You should chime in, ain't no telling what'll spark on the Val, the Val and Val show, the Val and Val show.
What's up? What's up? What's up?
I don't know. Barely me.
What's happening? Do what?
I said, you say, what's up? Barely me.
Barely you. I see you, Lasherie. What's up, baby? Yeah, y'all, come on in here. We got something good for you tonight. We got something good. So it's been a crazy, crazy week thus far. But I tell you what, we've made it almost to the end of the week. So I'm thankful for that. We are safe and sound. It's good to see you, Valerie, my co-host up in here.
Yes. We shall be okay. We shall be okay.
Everything good with you?
It's going better. You know, I'm going to be on vacation next week. So I was trying to get things, at work, keep it going, and computer issues today. They were down half the day. So you know what? It was like, whatever. So just so y'all know, I had to put on me a little anti-anxiety music before I came on the air to get my mind right.
Get your mind right. I hear you. Get your mind right. Yeah, well, next week, I guess we can tell them in advance that we will not have a show when the next 2 weeks.
No, just next week.
Just next week?
Uh-huh.
Okay, because Valerie, as she stated, is on vacation, and I am preparing to have a Dondra Heights film camp for the week of spring break. And if you're listening, ladies and gentlemen, please register your children on the website, www.NadyneGJohnsonFoundation.org. This is a free camp, and we'll feed them breakfast. We'll give them some training in voice over. We'll give them some acting skills, some screenwriting skills, all that sort of thing. Then we'll have lunch. Then we'll go back into some more curriculum, and we will have artists from the industry coming in to talk with them. So if you're interested, please contact me at 205-370-7805 and get your child registered. 8th through 12th graders only. I just had to make that plug. Now back to Conversation is Art. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us tonight on www. Val and Val Show.
Look, you might have been listening to that music with me. No, I'm just messing.
Hey, NGJ. Conversation is Art being brought to you by.
That's right. Look, you all. I'm sure all of you all saw the flyer in the title.
What's up? What flyer?
So we're gonna deal with this mental health. So let you all know this is actually the kickoff of every month. We will be having this guest on because we're gonna walk through this mental health / mental illness, and we're going to remove the stigma. That is our goal.
Yeah,
so, after he was so popular, when we had the young lady that took 10 years to find out she was bipolar to finally get diagnosed, and he came in and was answering some questions, you all enjoyed him so much. But we were like, you know what? You're going to be coming on once a month. We didn't even give him an option. We didn't give him an option.
Yeah, you're regular.
So look, I'm going to let Dr. Demel Coleman come on in, and I'm going to let him tell you about how qualified he is to have this conversation, because he can do it better than anyone.
Welcome, Doctor.
Good afternoon again. Pleasure to
Harold
be back
Coleman.
with you.
Yeah, welcome to Conversation is Art, sir. Good to see you again.
Good to see both of you. So I guess I'll kind of refresh kind of the story a little bit, just to give people a heads up. So I'm born and raised in actually a place called Jackson, Alabama, rural Alabama. So, and the reason I want to say that is because we're talking about removing the stigma. And to be honest, I had to remove the stigma from my own eyes. And here I am, a professional. So I grew up in a very Orthodox Christian home, as many people of color do, especially down in the South. And so here's my situation I had. I had a situation where I'm in a home, my mom, they're going through a divorce. It's a lot of chaos in our home. And when we left that home, nobody knew what was going on inside our home. You don't talk about home business to nobody else. And so we talked about Jesus. We prayed to Jesus to fix stuff, but we didn't talk to that stuff. Then I had one of the pillars of my life is my grandmother. And she tells me this story, and this is perfect, but she was at my uncle's wedding and a yellow jacket had gotten inside of her dress. A yellow jacket is stinging her.
Right.
But she didn't say one word and she did not move because she did not want to cause a scene at his wedding. So she put other people ahead of her own good. And when we think about our culture, that is what we're dealing with. We're talking about a people who are a very spiritual people. And we're asking a very spiritual people who look to Jesus for answers to then turn around and say, well, Jesus ain't enough. And that's kind of where I came from growing up. And then I go to medical school. So you got this kind of mix. And I decided I was going to be a surgeon. That was my goal, because growing up in that home, you want to fix stuff, remove stuff, and keep moving. Well, by my second year, like most medical students, I got, trying to figure out what was wrong with me. And I realized I had an autoimmune disease. So here I am, a very pragmatic, objective thinking person who black and white. And I got a condition that basically has the risk of putting me in a wheelchair. And my whole desire was to be a surgeon. Now, I just told you about my grandmother who was being stung and didn't say a word. Well, here I am in medical school, not saying a word. So my goal of being a surgeon is gone, but nobody could tell it from the outside. So I was going to my rotations. I was still making my A's, still getting great reviews, and coming home and being as depressed as I could be. Not one time did I say anything to anybody, because that's not the way I was brought up. I prayed harder and I got my word, but I didn't tell nobody. And so by the time I got to psychiatry, which, just being perfectly honest about my bias, I didn't think psychiatry was real medicine. And I'm just being real. I did not. That was the last thing I ever wanted to do. But by the time I got to psychiatry, I guess I was so broken because of what happened to me that I was receptive to what I was learning from my patients that actually ended up helping me. And so it definitely removed some of the scales that I had. But I'm just going to be honest. Here you have a very objective guy, black and white. I need answers, and I want to be able to cut it out. And then I'm going into a profession, let's just be real, that is very subjective. It is the least respected field in medicine. I had to work through that stigma myself. It's the least respected. And then if you look back historically, especially when you talk about medicine as it relates to blacks, we all have heard about Tuskegee. And the complicitness of watching for 30 years people go through something and not do something so you can document the effectiveness of how this disease progresses on a people. So we wonder why we have these issues. So you got cultural issues growing up, especially with the black community, with our faith. We put a lot on faith, and I don't have an issue with faith. I always remind my clients that, when Paul was talking to Timothy and Timothy's stomach was upset, Paul told him, hey, go get a little wine. Right. And if you study history, the Greeks used wine. It was medicinal. They put medicine in the wine. And so that's how I approach things. But I approach those things because of my own upbringing, because of my own biases, because of my own stigmas that I had about mental health myself. And so when we talk about this, we got to understand that you only got 4% of blacks in psychiatry. as far as
Mm-hmm.
psychologists, psychiatrists. And so you got a situation where you have a profession that labels diagnosis based on norms, and norms are based on what's the norms in society.
Right.
And there are differences in the cultural representation of how people deal with things. I just told you, like, know a lot of family members that talk about speaking in tongues. You walk into the ER, tell somebody you're speaking in tongues, they're going to label you as psychotic.
Yeah, true.
And I was chief resident 2 years in a row in my third and fourth year at UAB, and I was in the room when somebody was talking about speaking in tongues, and they were talking about hearing from God. And that's all that person I was with focused on. They did not focus on the fact that this person was spending money, that they were being impulsive, that they were having racing thoughts. All they were focused on was it sounded psychotic. So they wanted to label this person as schizophrenic when this person really is bipolar. And there's a totally different way of treatment. And so you can say, well, that's a bias. I think we can just be honest that everybody's conditioned. And some people are conditioned to see things a certain way. And if we don't understand that, you're going to lead to situations like what happened on your show with the lady. You're talking about a doctor spending 30 minutes with somebody and patching a diagnosis on them that's going to label them for the rest of their life. And so some of the problems that we're having with Blacks actually going to psychiatrists is part of the field itself. And so you got two issues. You got the personal issues that people really need to be honest about. And that's why I really want to do the show, because we got to get to a place where we talk more so we can be honest about things, so that we can actually get people to see, no, yes, there are some situations where I want you to be aware of what is good mental health, so that when you see it, you receive it. And I also want you to understand, yes, there are situations where some people may not see you fully in the way you are, and you're going to have to speak up for yourself.
Well, Dr. Coleman, let me bring it, because you mentioned about only 4% of Blacks being in psychiatry. And I'm real big on when people are telling me they've been going to a doctor for things, be it medical doctor, whatever, and especially if they're Black. And I say, well, what color is your doctor, or what sex is your doctor? Because people don't think about that. That plays a big role sometimes in how you get treated. Personally, for me in my adult life, I've never had a male physician. And that was intentional.
Mm-hmm.
Because so often with women, things get played. Oh, you're just going through change, or it's all, women always got to be some mental going on. So, we had Trent Out Loud on a couple of weeks ago. And interestingly enough, he actually gave his psychiatrist permission, he said, to talk to his very best friend that knew him better than anybody, which allowed him to be diagnosed sooner.
Yes.
Rather than later. Now, he started manifesting things younger, but of course, back in that day, there was nothing, people were going to do about it per se. But let's talk about that Jesus thing. And I see Tangent making on here, her and Valencia Pruitt, they had this thing that say, Jesus and therapy go together. It goes. And if we look at it honestly, when Jesus dealt with people, he did give them therapy. He actually talked to them and, told them, like, okay, this is how we're going to do this. What's going on with, the woman at the well? That was a short therapy session. I think people miss that. So even Jesus had support. I tell people, he just wasn't hanging out at Lazarus and Mary Martha's house. That was his actually support system in the earth realm. And we get so spiritual that we actually look at Jesus' life as from the books in the Bible, from Matthew, until he died. But there was everyday living going on back then, and people were having life issues. Life was coming at them fast. So it's something we definitely need to normalize in our community, because we're seeing the death by suicide going up, or even attempts. We're having people that just not able to just deal with life stresses, but they don't say anything due to shame.
Well, I think some of that, and this is where I think some of our spiritual leaders need to take a little more assertive role in destigmatizing mental health. Because how many times do you hear in the church talking about high blood pressure, diabetes?
Yeah.
That, you need to just pray to Jesus about that, because that's how you don't worry about taking your medicine.
Mhm.
But anytime somebody comes in with anxiety, we say, cast your cares on the Lord. If you really cast your cares on the Lord, you won't be anxious. How you depressed? If you was really in God, you had the fruits of the Spirit: love, joy, peace, righteousness. But at the same time, most of your health issues, high blood pressure, diabetes, are a direct combination of genes and choice. Yet nobody sits here and says, well, you just need to get yourself right with Jesus when it comes to your diabetes. And we need to realize that mental health, your brain is not over here and your body's in some other spot. They're all connected. And here's the reality: what people don't understand. Like, let's just take something as simple as poor sleep. Somebody doesn't sleep well. Sleep doesn't just affect somebody as far as anxiety and depression. You got poor sleep, you're going to have increased risk for obesity, increased risk for high blood pressure, increased risk for obesity, high blood pressure, even heart disease. And so how are we going to sit up here and put one thing in one box and not realize that it affects everything about us? And so, and I try, and that's what, for me, when I ask questions, and this is where, the profession needs to do a better job. We do need to take into consideration that as a culture, Blacks are very spiritual, and you have to respect somebody's spirituality.
Yeah.
And I embrace that with my clients. I ask them, are you spiritual? What does that mean for you? Mm-hmm. Because wherever I've read books, I've read so much about Buddha. I've read so much of the Quran. I've read the Kabbalah. I've read the Upanishads. I've spent time understanding yoga. I try to understand whatever their religion is, because I want to meet them where they are. Right. See, you said something earlier about Jesus. Jesus met Matthew where he was. Yeah. Jesus met Nicodemus where he was. Right. Jesus met the woman who was in the act of adultery where she was. And he showed her compassion. And so what I want people to understand, let's get away from thinking that somebody's weak or that somebody's lazy, or we start having character issues and labeling people when they're having a hard time dealing with life, because it doesn't matter what that issue is. Can we not show compassion?
Right.
True. Well, Dr. Coleman, let me ask you this, because you went going back to the clergy and the pastor, preacher, whatever term you refer to them as. Sometimes I think you have so many pastors that's dealing with mental illness, and their way is to preach and preach and preach rather than going to get help. I do thank God that my pastor is a big mental health advocate. I mean, he shares that, that he does therapy, has a counselor, which that is great. And he's young, my pastor's young, which that is great. But I know for most part, as you said, in the church, it's, now you can throw a fast on it too. Now, if the prayer ain't working, you can throw it. And granted, I'm not saying prayer doesn't work, and having the elders come to pray for you, all of it is necessary, because that's what, for those of us that are Christians and believe in this, is that the Bible says that we come together, touch and agree. However, just like you said, I take my high blood pressure pill between 9 and 10 every night. Okay. And my blood pressure is controlled. I'm working on getting this extra weight off. Y'all give me a shout out. I'm 21 pounds down since Christmas.
All right. Woo, 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 congratulations.
And so there's so many things, but let's talk about, since I mentioned diet, let's talk about foods and moods, because I know you deal with that too.
Well, see, here's the thing for me. This is why I really like to get people to make sure that they understand, when you go to a doctor, that doctor should be listening to you. That doctor should understand you. And if that doctor is spending more time looking down, writing, and never looks up one time to see you as a person, that's a sign that that's not the doctor for you. Because when I see my clients, and my clients will tell you, I send them home with a big, thick packet before they come see me. And I ask all kinds of questions, such as, how was your mom what birth order were you? How old was your mom when she had you? See, when we talk about mental illness, what people don't understand is the health of that mother impacts that child. Some schizophrenia, some other mental illness, and even medical illness some of those issues start in utero. So we talk about diet. What is the mom eating? How is the mom taking care of herself? Because if she is stressed, guess what those stress hormones are doing? They're going across the placenta into that baby. So before the baby even comes out of the womb, that baby is already an anxious baby. You know, people don't realize that. And when people talk about breastfeeding, we always talk about breastfeeding for the sense of giving people protection from infections and stuff. But there's another component to breastfeeding. It releases oxytocin. Oxytocin helps kids to calm down, to feel that calm, because when a kid comes into this world, all these stimuli are overwhelming them. So the mother is really important, and what she eats, and let's go into what Val's talking about, is really important, not only for her, but as for us in general, because most people don't realize this, but as far as a female, your body can only handle 25 grams of sugar. For a male, that's 37.5 in a day. So what happens to this extra sugar that we have in all our food? I mean, you got donut-sized sugar in ketchup, and I used to love ketchup. But you know what happens to that sugar? It gets broke down by your cytokines. We're not going to go into the weeds, but I'm going to just go a little bit. It creates this compound that crosses into your brain, and it prevents these two compounds, tryptophan, from being converted into serotonin. Serotonin, most people take, is the feel-good hormone. So when you eat a whole bunch of sugar, you're actually decreasing the levels of serotonin in your brain. So you can actually increase issues of depression and anxiety. There's a really good book called Your Brain on Food. And it talks about how food directly impacts your mental health. So when we talk about that, we got to worry about those foods. We got to worry about MSG. There's MSG in so many different foods, and MSG can increase risk for panic attacks, anxiety. I didn't want to go into the weeds too much, but you brought up the food, so I'm at least go on the surface a little bit. So I just say that, you know, we eat so much processed foods in this country. If you look in third world countries, they don't have the litany of the chronic autoimmune diseases that we have. And a lot of that comes from the foods we're eating. And sadly, people who are at the bottom end, as far as the socioeconomic status, they have limited options as far as the quality of food. And I remember when I started eating healthy, I started eating this funny sounding bread and all these kind of things, kimchi, and I started looking at my grocery bill. Man, it's expensive to be healthy.
Yeah.
And we wonder why people are having health issues. Like, there's an old saying by Hippocrates, I think it was Hippocrates, it says, food is medicine. And food really is. If you're drinking these energy drinks, these kids are drinking energy drinks Tic Tacs. I mean, they drink them left and right. And I had a nurse, and, you know, she wasn't a patient, I'll say this. It was a nurse that I knew, and she was drinking like 3 and 4 Red Bulls a day. And I'm like, that's why you're having anxiety. And if you keep drinking that much, I said, it's going to increase problems on your heart. We're talking about a woman in her 20s had congestive heart failure from drinking energy drinks.
And I just want you to touch on it because you all, with our series, he's going to deep dive into the foods and everything. We have a really good outline for you all coming up. This is our first one. We got 7 more shows. So, you know, we know he's going to at least be here 7 more months. Okay. So look, we got him on lock. We got him on lock. You know, I think about and the stigma. It used to be, you know, with the kids now, you got ADHD, and they got some stuff now. I don't even know the name of it. And I may not be right with this because, look, I'm an ER nurse. I am not a psychiatrist, although I dealt with people having psychotic breaks and stuff in the ER. And let me tell y'all, it is something, but it also makes me realize that when we see all these people being killed that are obviously having a psychotic break, y'all, you can obviously tell when somebody is not there per se. So when you see them being gunned down, that's a deliberate choice by even the police to do that, because you realize when somebody is just going off. But with all these kids, because for me, I think how we didn't have ADHD and all that stuff, because when I was in school, first of all, we played outside at home. You weren't cooped up in your room. Then even in school, we had a morning recess, then we went outside after lunch, then we had an evening recess. Children were not forced to sit all day to learn academically. We went outside and explored outdoors. So do you think some of the diagnosis in children are tied to just the way they're being raised now and the lack of activity?
That's not even a question. So let me hit this. We'll go deeper another time, but just take a couple of things. Like the book Spark. There's a really good book called Spark. And it
Part.
talks
Okay.
about, yeah, it talks about how exercise, they did exercise in the inner city, and exercise before tests improved cognitive abilities. Exercise actually decreased issues of ADHD, impulsivity. And we are pulling PE, physical activity, out of the schools when actually kids need more physical activity. And to get to your point about these kids, and this is a hard one. I'm just going to try to do it without, but the reality is you look in our community in particular, and here's where bias come in. When a kid in the inner city has issues of impulsivity or irritability, those kids will be labeled oppositional defiant. And there's a study, and I'll send that to you later. But it shows that Black kids and Hispanic kids get labeled oppositional defiant or along those conduct disorder down those ways, whereas non but basically whites get labeled as ADHD. So they get placed on stimulants. So you got not only the issue of the stimulants is a problem, as you say, and I'll hit that, but you got an issue of kids being labeled as being oppositional defiant and all of that, what that entails. And so it's twofold. You got kids that are basically being labeled as bad and they're not getting help. And then you got another situation where, yes, they're being overdiagnosed, but here's the problem with that. You got kids that don't do physical activity. You got kids that are on these electronic devices all night. You know how many parents I've had to lecture about letting their kids be on these devices up until 12, 11, and 12, and 1 o'clock in the morning? Kids need about 10 hours of sleep, period. Their brains are still developing. And here we are letting them be on devices all this time. There are some studies that showed that by being on these devices like TikTok and stuff, our attention span is less than that of a goldfish. Like, yeah, there's a really good book, Netflix movie. I keep throwing all this stuff out. Hopefully somebody catching it, but it's called The Social Dilemma. It's called The Social Dilemma. And it talks about the negative effects of social media on kids and stuff. But as it relates to ADHD, we can go, in Europe, they ban certain foods such as red dye and other things, components that are found in our foods. You know why? Because we are a consumerist society. We have individual rights. We believe everybody should have right to do whatever they want, and we let them eat whatever they want, and they eat bunches of sugar. There was a study that showed that people who are the most vulnerable, if you look in their carts, and I did this the other day, I started doing this when I go into Dollar General stuff sometimes, those that are on the system, so to say, they have so much more junk food in their buggies. Mm-hmm. And they're eating all these processed foods, and these kids' brains are not designed to have that much sugar in them at that young of an age. They need fruits. They need vegetables. They're deficient. In our country, a lot of people are deficient in vitamins because we don't eat healthy. Most people sit in a building all day. There's only, and I'm trying not to go too far off, but let me get to this point. There's only 500 light units coming off of these lights that we see. You go outside on a cloudy day, it's 10,000. You go outside on a sunny day, that's 30 to 50,000. The vast majority of Americans are vitamin D deficient. Vitamin D is important. It's not just the vitamin D, it's like a hormone. So it affects your mood, not only your bones, but it affects your mood. And so you're having kids with a lot of irritability and anger and stuff. And a lot of them are deficient in some basic nutrients that they have. There's a really good book called Lucifer's Curve. And did you read that one?
No, I'm talking about the name.
Well, it's on purpose because what they found is there's a direct correlation to increased issues of antisocial behavior and lead composition in the bloodstream of particularly minorities who are in inner cities.
What was the name of that?
Lucifer's Curve. Lucifer, okay. Like Lucifer, and Curve, CURVE. So you're talking about a situation where people who are living in the inner city where, these homes back in the day were not the best homes, and you got lead exposure. And these kids have higher levels of lead. And lead not only affects them cognitively in the sense of decreasing their ability to really be able to function, but also increase issues of anger and irritability. So there is so much. I'm trying to stay.
Yeah. And y'all, this is just kind of overview of what you're going to have coming up. So we're just trying to touch on what we're having. I know for me, and this is something I started doing years ago, I don't watch the news at night. Mm-hmm. And actually, this past year, I started greatly limiting my television watching. I limit even if I watch during the week, it's 1 hour, literally, time. I have my cell phone goes on do not disturb at 9:30 every night, and I don't use any devices, get into bed, because all of that blue light and stuff, it re-stimulates your mind and makes you not want to be able to go to sleep. And then I found out when you watch the news and all that tragic stuff, you don't really sleep well because it's playing in your
Yes.
mind, even though you're asleep. So
Demel, let me ask you this question.
Yes, sir.
I am one that I consider a workaholic. Okay. I work even when I'm resting, I'm working because I'm thinking about the next episode or the next voiceover or whatever. And I did all that when I was in high school working for a law firm. I saw those guys work like that. So I decided that's the way you got to do it. I saw my dad work hard, so I do it. And that's what I enjoy doing. I enjoy waking up in the middle of the night, talking to the Lord about this idea. He's downloading information to me, and I'm getting up at 4:00, writing it down so I won't forget it. Is something wrong with me?
Well,
yes. I'm going to answer that question. Yes.
But here's the thing, and see, this is where I read all these spiritual books. So this is where there's some beliefs that, from a different books that I've read, that around 3 and 4 o'clock is, as you say, the Lord speaks to people. Some people believe that. So if that is the case with you, what I would say is you need to go to bed early. Go to bed early so you can make sure you get. They did a study for the military, and this is pretty scary. Like the military who takes target practice, those that had 7 hours of sleep, they hit the target 98% of the time, I think it was. And when they cut it down to only getting 6 hours of sleep, they only hit the target 50 something percent.
So 1 hour.
1 hour. If you cut it down another hour, it went down to 38%.
What?
Wow.
Yes. So what people say that I don't need this much sleep, I hear you, and you've conditioned yourself not to. I used to be like that. Like my wife will tell you that. We used to joke about me being Jamaican. If you look at my profile, I've worked so many jobs and I was on call at so many places. So I was at UAB as a resident. I was a director over a hospice company as a resident. And I was moonlighting at St. Vincent's, Coleman, Baptist, Shelby, Bryce. So I'm doing all these moonlighting, being a medical director over a hospice as I'm a resident, and I'm still in residence. So when I get out of the residency, I go to the Harper Center, which is the state. I then go do a co-medical director down at Demopolis, which is in the country. And I'm still doing call. So I'm working all these hours, probably averaging about 4 hours of sleep. And I felt good getting 4 hours of sleep. Like I was energized on 4 hours of sleep. Yeah. But the problems with that is I have this autoimmune disease that I told you about. So that led me into braces for 5 years. Because there's a really good book, another book. It's called When the Body Says No. And basically it is an autoimmune issue where, you may be pushing yourself, but your body's starting to break down. You're going to start having health issues because you're not taking care of yourself. And for me, it led me to be in braces. And so I had a wake-up call like, whoa, dude, you got to slow down a little bit. And so I started changing the way I eat, changing the way I took care of myself. And I'm out of my braces now, thank God. But it took me changing the way I saw myself. And so, we talk about these situations, and that's important because, most people the reality is we are all conditioned. You said something. Yeah. You saw them do it. Here's the reality. This is what people don't realize. By the time most people are about 3 years, you start off in this world. God created us wonderfully. We come in the world with small brains that really have to grow. So we come in the world with billions and billions of neurons, with trillions of synapses, right? And so our brain, when you're a little kid, like you come out the womb to about 3, it's trying to figure out the world. It's trying to figure out how this world works. And you start pruning your synapses. And so you start cutting down the stuff because you start thinking you know how the world works. This by the time you're 3. Now, would you trust a 3-year-old to drive your car? But most of us are conditioned by the time we're 3. And that factors in, there's a Bowlby, the whole attachment theory, how your mother held you, how your mother cared for you, or your caregivers, we should say. All those things are important. The home environment, was it stressful? And so when we talk about that, this is where it affects minorities, just being honest. We just talked about the last time. In the 50s, you had 80% of kids in two-parent homes. Now you got 73% in single-parent homes.
Yeah.
I can tell you there's not been one day that I've been in that rural clinic that I've not had a mother come in with 2 and 3 kids talking about how overwhelmed she is. I've yet to have a day where I've not had a single mom being overwhelmed. And she's overwhelmed, and guess what happens to those kids?
They overwhelmed with her.
They're overwhelmed. And so it's not so much that, what I tell people is, if we're in this room, you flip that light switch off. That's your genes. Your genes are the light switch. But stuff happens in your life. And we talked about this last time. 68% of people that had depression, anxiety, obesity, and all those issues, they came out of a traumatic home. Home. And most of that trauma was emotional neglect. We're not even talking about physical abuse, emotional neglect. Now, you think about that, emotional neglect. What's happening to a single mom who's stretched thin and she got 3 and 4 kids? Are those kids being emotionally taken care of to the best of her ability, but they're not really being taken care of? We label these kids, but really the problem is that what we're seeing is more like the canary in the coal mine. The kids' issues are an indication that they got issues at home. Mm-hmm. And nobody's addressing it. Nobody. And even the moms have issues. We just, since the last time we talked, one of the highest, the group that's growing now with suicide is Black men. Since the last time we talked. So now we got Black kids twice as likely to commit suicide. And now Black men are shooting up as far as committing suicide. The opiate crisis was mostly a poor white thing. Guess who now is leading with the opiate crisis? Blacks.
Wow. Really?
Blacks. This just came out. Some of you can Google it. It's scary. And so what we're saying is, we got to be honest that this new paradigm that we have developed in our culture is killing us. It really is.
Well, let me ask you this, Dr. Coleman, because, we live in the get the American dream, pursue, and we never slow down. And I was actually having this conversation with someone. I said, I remember growing up, my mom worked 7 to 3. She came home. We would be outside laughing and playing. We had all this time we spent together. But now we're living in a world where you got 12-hour shifts, 10-hour shifts. You got 2-hour commutes to and from. And in some cases, it seems like this train is running down the track, and I don't even know if people see a desire or recognize that something's wrong, because abnormal has become so normal. And I know for me, one thing, my mom was a very type A person. And I was too initially, but my dad was very laid back. My dad had slept 10 to 12 hours. Okay, my dad was gonna get his sleep. He's gonna take naps in the day. My sister and I got a niece in Detroit. They tell you they love sleep, okay? They get their rest. Me, I was like you said, I could function on like 5, right? But as I studied, I was like, you know what? Even if I don't go to sleep right away, I go and lay down in my bed. And what I found is when I started doing that, I started falling asleep. And I started sleeping longer and longer each night, just settling my mind down. So you can't unlearn it.
Well, I will talk about sleep another time, but I'll just throw out this for people since you brought up sleep. Human beings are outside. We're supposed to be outside. That's where our ancestors were, right? And being outside, you're exercising and you're getting sun. So what I tell my clients, I say, look, whatever the time that the sun rises, and there's studies on this, go out within 15 minutes of the sun rising and go outside and just go for a walk out there with the sun if you can. Mm-hmm. Just being out there will help reset your circadian rhythm. So go outside early in the morning when the sun rises, go outside midday to get the maximum level of vitamin D, get your little walk, be out in the woods. There's studies where actually being in the woods, just going for a walk, decreases stress and anxiety. So Val, you can, like you was talking about going on the porch, that's a wonderful opportunity because being outside in nature is actually very calming. and then go out there as the sun is setting, because the different hues are cueing your body to tell you that it's time to go to bed. See, as human beings, when it gets dark, being dark, we have what is called survival genes. That's why when we get in the dark, we can imagine all kind of crazy things, because our ancestors in the dark, if you were away from the herd or from the clan, that was death. That was death.
Okay.
And so those genes are still there. And so they still affect us. And so the issue is, why are we having all these lights? Because we are messing with our natural body's way of telling us it's time to go to bed. Most people stay on their devices all the way up till bedtime, which you already talked about. You should be off that device 90 minutes before bedtime. Off.
Mm-hmm.
And in that 90 minutes, what can you do? Well, what I tell my clients, what I do, I stretch. You can do yoga. Take a hot bath. I take a hot shower at night. Now, better thing would be to take a hot bath with Epsom salt, because Epsom salt has magnesium. We'll talk about this another time. Most Americans are deficient in magnesium. Deficiency in magnesium is associated with anxiety. So if you got anxiety, you might want to talk to your doctor about seeing if they can check your magnesium level. Because if it is too low, that could be one of the reasons for your issues of anxiety. So I take a hot bath and Epsom salt with a little lavender. And so then when you get out, like I said, you can do what you're saying, play some relaxing music like you had on earlier, and get yourself to that place where you are slowly winding down. You don't just go 100 miles, 0 to 100, as Drake says, and then jump into bed and fall asleep. That's not how that should work. Just being honest. And so we have these stigmas, like you brought up, this American way that we're supposed to be busting our butts off. That's the American dream. And so we've all been conditioned to become these consumers. That's why, and that's a whole nother thing, why in the Black community, sadly, $1 doesn't even go through 6 hours in the Black community.
Wow.
We spend it so fast. And we are such a consumer society that we have become, as Alec Tocqueville wrote this back, it's a great book called Democracy in America. This was way back in, I think, in the 1800s. Alexis Tocqueville wrote it. He talked about the fact that when he came over here and observed, he came from France and observed the American system, he thought, wow, this is an amazing thing, talking about the Industrial Revolution. But what he said, the one thing that kept us from falling off the deep end was the fact that we were very spiritual people. He says, but the day they replace their spirituality for their quest for materialism, this country is going to fall apart.
And we headed down that road. We there. We in the tumble.
If you look, our culture was so deprived of getting into stuff because of segregation, Jim Crow, that we had to take care of each other. And then, nobody's saying we shouldn't have civil rights stuff. So nobody misconstrue what I'm saying. But as a result of those things being passed and us being somewhat more accepted into society, we began to embrace the American dream of consumerism that became much more prevalent in the 60s and 70s. Like, this culture went from one-parent homes where one person worked, the mom stayed at home, to now both people were working because they all wanted this fear of missing out. They wanted the nice car. They wanted the nice house. They wanted the nice things. So we have replaced intrinsic values with extrinsic values. And so one of the stigmas that we really need to address is the fact that we have become very materialistic in this culture. And we don't have to have everything. They did what is called a happiness study. And what they found is America, who's all this wealth, the most wealthiest nation in the world, we're not even in the top 10 for its happiest countries. Third world countries are happier than people in our country. Third world countries where people have far less are happier.
Well, you know what, Dr. Coleman, though? Our parents were happy. My parents were happy. We had fun. We had a joyful house. I mean, and that's what I was telling someone. I realized this probably, I've been a nurse 33 years, so I probably realized this at probably year 10, between year 10 and 12. I was like, you know what? I got a college degree, but I don't think my quality of life is as good as when I grew up. Even though on one hand, we grew up poor, and actually my cousin is on here, and we were having this messenger conversation, and we were talking about how we grew up farming. Her dad was a farmer too, and we grew up on the farms, and we were talking about everybody talking about how expensive things is, and we was like, well, we know how to grow stuff.
That's
we
right.
really know how to grow stuff. And this year was the first time I thought about, you may need to go back to planting the garden, because in my mind, I was like, oh, I don't want to plant a garden no more. But now I see so much the value in what I learned being self-sustaining, because that is how our folks survive. I told them I didn't worry about food growing up. And I didn't have to worry about MSG and it being genetically modified or anything, because we walked out the front door to the side of the house.
That's right.
And my mom
You got
got
your
her greens
tomatoes, your cucumbers, your greens.
and even then the meats, my uncles and everybody, and the cows and hogs and stuff. So they were not fed whatever they feed them now.
Everything. But and so when we talk about these stigmas that are hindering our health, part of the problem is we're all in pursuit, Val, of this American dream of we got to get more stuff. And going to see a doctor who tells you to slow down surely doesn't line up with that American dream.
Right.
I'm just being honest. And so we really need to do a better job of being honest with ourselves, that this train is really taking us down a path that we really don't want to find ourselves in, because right now it's already taking us there. Suicides are up everywhere. Health conditions are up everywhere. And like I said, I'm not saying that when you go to a psychiatrist that there may be some barriers there too. Let's just be honest. But what I'm telling you is what I want to hopefully teach people to do over the course of things is to be more aware of what's important to you and make sure your values are being respected by the people you're going to see. And yes, it may only be 4% Blacks in psychology, psychiatrists, but I got a friend, his name is Dr. Dorsey. I'm gonna shout him out because he's down in Greensboro. He's doing a yeoman's job with kids down there, outpatient mental health for people in that poor area. And he listens, and he incorporates people's faith into their treatment. You know what I'm saying? So what I try to tell people is, faith without works is dead. So let's work on your faith and let me give you some works. So when the scripture talks about renewing your mind and taking every thought captive, that's what the Bible is really talking about, CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy. We'll go down that road, but I try to show them how what we're talking about, these things that the Bible is saying, taking every thought captive, I'm going to show you how to take your thoughts captive using cognitive behavioral therapy. This is more in alignment with your faith. It's going to help you to really be able to live out your faith. And so what I hope that people will take from this conversation is find doctors that really listen to you. Find doctors that really appreciate the fact that what you're bringing to the table is a true understanding of who you are. And that doctor should be trying to ask family members. I always enjoy talking to family members. And what I tell family members is this: look, I can't tell you about them, but you can tell me anything in the world that you think would help me to help them because of HIPAA. So anybody that wants to call me, they say, well, I want to call you and tell you, but she's saying you can't do that. I said, no, I can hear anything you tell me. I just can't tell you any information about her, and you can't ask me any information about her. But everything that you think is important, guess what? I really appreciate it, because the next time I see that client, we will talk about it. And so
I want to read this statement. This is from my sister. She said, we didn't know we were poor until another race told us we were poor. We were doing fine. And really the thing is, had we been given the opportunity, if they hadn't reneged on the deal, we supposed to be getting the 40 acres and a mule, you know what I'm saying, to be self-sustaining, we would have been fine. And I'm going to say this, something my dad said. He said, we fought the right fight to get rights, but we should have remained in our communities where we were together. And I can speak to that growing up in my hometown, because we counted over 40 something Black owned businesses. And you're talking about, this is in the 60s. And I was like, wow. And it hit me. I was like, there was a Black owned ice cream shop in my community. And it was like, we just started, it was a full service filling station, as they was called then. Google that, young folks, filling station. That's when somebody actually came out and they fill your tank. You didn't even get out your car. So look, we were actually living a better quality of life with services and stuff back then. We're paying a boatload of money and can't even get service now.
Right. You're right. And like I said, that goes back to value systems. And this whole, because a stigma is really basically a mark of disgrace. And so,
Okay.
and that can cover anything. And what people don't realize is your brain is an organ just like your heart, just like every other thing. And the difference is your brain is very complex and it feeds on everything that's going on in your life. And we have to be open to understand that if we don't take care of the whole body, we're not taking care of the whole person.
Mm-hmm.
And
Good
we
point.
have too many people that are too ashamed or too embarrassed or feeling like they're weak. And what I always tell my clients, are you weak about having high blood pressure? Are you weak about having heart disease? Are you weak or embarrassed about having cancer? We have to put those conditions on the same level as the conditions that are affecting your brain as well. And there's too many treatments that are available for people right now for us not to get the right help that we need. And like I said, it's twofold. You got us, those of us that are brought up in such a way that we feel stigmatized. And then we run across people sometimes in the health profession that don't help that situation. And
Gotcha.
so, what I want people to understand is be aware of this, but don't let that deter you from getting good help because
Right.
good help is out there. And
Good point.
that's the most important thing. Don't allow what you see on TV or what you hear about, oh man, when I go to that doctor, they're already going to peg me this way or they're going to mistreat me this way. Well, if you run across that doctor, guess what? That's not the doctor for you. Go see
Mm-hmm.
somebody else. You don't have to settle. Make sure somebody's listening to you. They should be checking blood work on you. You need to, if you got health issues and they're not ruling out medical conditions, like if somebody's depressed, have they checked your thyroid? When's the last time you had your thyroid checked? We talked about electrolytes and stuff. When's the last time you had those things checked? If it's a first time psychotic person, did they get a CT or an MRI of the brain to make sure that there's not something there that is causing this? Did you ask
Yeah.
them about whether or not they're using drugs or herbs? What over the counter things are you taking? Because, one of the things that I read about recently, well, I think it was Miss Alabama, the lady that, the incident happened, that she was taking something over the counter that caused her to have her break. And I've seen so many of my clients take things that are over the counter. And I'm not listing the names of them because I don't want people to go out there and
You
grab it.
take them through.
But there are things that people are taking out of gas stations that are not FDA regulated that induce psychosis.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody talks about weed. Oh man, weed is good. And I remember when I was in college, I seen people use weed. And the people that I saw use weed in college, they don't do the things I see people using weed today do.
True.
And that's because marijuana nowadays, they're lacing it with PCP, ecstasy, formaldehyde,
Yeah.
spice. They're putting all this stuff. So, I tell my clients, I'm like, look, if you ain't growing your weed, you're at somebody's mercy.
Yeah.
And I've seen too many people who come
Yeah.
in here whose brains are screwed up because they use something that somebody laced. And you can't drug test for it because it's not even one of the panels.
Right.
And it's scary. And so we have this situation where, we treat drug abuse as if somehow that's a flaw in somebody's character. No, somebody needs help.
Yeah.
I don't care if they're strung out on cocaine, alcohol, or whatever it is. Instead of judging them, love on them, help them find ways to get help. And we do too much of that in our society where we look at substance abuse as if somehow it's a flaw in somebody's character, instead of that it's a condition that somebody's going through and they need help. Like you said earlier, Jesus did adultery. The punishment for adultery was to be stoned. Jesus didn't stone that woman. He said, "Hey, who's without sin cast the first stone." And when he looked around, everybody was gone. He looked at the lady and said, "Where are your accusers?" She said, "They're gone." He said, "Well, neither do I." He
Mm-hmm.
loved on her.
Yeah.
We
And
too.
Valencia mentioned here, she's talking about, it's the same principle with eating disorders. But going back to what you was talking about, the different things we focus on, we'll look at drug abuse, we'll look at alcohol and those type things. But eating disorders, which the majority of us have them, that we eat emotionally, and some of us don't even realize it. I know for
Okay.
me, I'm in an 18-month I say a Bible study. It's called
Mhm.
Weight Loss God's Way. I'm gonna give them a shout out.
All right.
And it really changed my whole perspective on what I've struggled, the yo-yo dieting.
Mhm.
and everything. And y'all, sometimes it's not necessarily something traumatic or horrific, that it could be the bad, growing up in the country. My grandmama and my mama could throw down. So
Mhm.
food was a celebration. And we
Mhm.
could eat when we couldn't do anything else.
Mhm.
Uh, so you learn to replace celebrations, don't always have to be tied to food. But when we celebrate, what do?
Eat.
Eat. Or
But
change the foods that you serve versus the high fat things.
what
So it's really been great to just go through and process that. But I had to go back and just go back all the way home to figure out, first of all, the emotional triggers that would
Mhm.
make me want to eat. And then I had to replace that with something else.
once again, that's another issue. People look like that's some kind of character flaw. No, it's not. And it's a condition that we need to help people to work through. There are different reasons why people eat. There's an impulsive type, compulsive type, impulsive, compulsive. So when we think about it, the importance of that is also this. If it's an impulsive type person who's eating, right? So there's different treatments that would be a little different for somebody. So that's a case where they don't have the regulation. They just quickly, whenever they think, they do.
Mm-hmm.
They sit here and they don't have any regulation on their frontal lobe. So they need medicines like serotonin to help them. But when we talk about the compulsive type, they're sitting here, and like I said, you just got to figure out where people are in their type of eating issues. And not only that, what's the reason? We talked about this before, that ACE study, that they found that 68% of those women that were in those conditions that were having eating disorders came from a history of childhood trauma. And then you also talk about the conditioning in the home. I know I was told, hey, you better clean your plate.
Yeah.
Right.
And so you're taught as an early age because of lack that you clean your plate. And then let's compound that. Most people eat fast food. The worst thing you can do is eat and be moving, or eat and watch TV, because you diminish your natural body's ability to tell you when you're full. And so you keep eating over the amount. And it becomes a habit. There's an area in your brain called the dorsal striatum. And basically, it's the area of your brain associated with habits and addictions. And so here you have this area in your brain when you're young, these habits that you're creating, they're becoming more and more ingrained in who you are. And so that becomes your default. So some people eat because when you think about a baby, when a baby's upset and stuff, what do people do? They give them a pacifier. They put something in their mouth. A lot of people are emotional eaters because they don't know how to regulate their emotions, so they eat. So the eating disorder is more of the canary, as I say, in the coal mine. Instead of judging people for the eating problem, how about we sit down and talk to them and figure out what's going on? What are the activities you're doing around your eating? Because there's practical things you can do. Like we said, cut off stuff. Be an intuitive eater. Slow down, eat slow, pay attention to what you're eating. Stop being so fast. And once again, it goes back to that stigma. Somehow we treat that as a character flaw. People die from eating disorders. They die.
Let me read you some of your comments. What Miss Barbara Thomas said, teach and preach, Dr. Coleman. And Valencia with Willow Grace Wellness, let's give them a shout out, her and Miss Tan Jamaica. She said to learn what's eating you. You got to learn what's eating you so you can stop eating up everything else. And you was talking about, I get out now, I'll call it Tuesday and Thursday. Those are my meditation walk. And I walk my neighborhood and I go hiking on Saturday. So if any of y'all want to hike on Saturdays, come to Ruffin Mountains, 7:15 a.m. with the Birmingham hikers. And we take you at all levels. We got somebody that'll stay back there.
That's a serious walk there, Val. I've been to Ruffin Mountain. That's a serious walk.
We actually, the group is so great that if you can't go all the way, there's somebody that will turn around and go back. They let you work your way up. But that's me, wonderful. The first time I showed up, I was like, I'm going all the way, baby. Let's go. Let's do this.
But you said something, though. You said something that's really important, what people don't realize. And see, I'm going to throw a little scripture in there. When in the New Testament, we're called the strong or admonished to bear the infirmities of the weak. When you talk about a cord of one is easily broken, but a cord of three is not so easily broken. So most of the problems that people are doing, they're trying to do these things on their own.
Yeah.
Right.
We need help. And so if we're going to go in the Bible, how about we go in the Bible and take out that part and get some help? and let people help us along our way.
Right.
So going to exercise with somebody increases your chance of exercise. And let's stop allowing what society has placed upon us to keep us from getting the help that we need.
That's it. Well, look, woo, it's 8:00, y'all. This was time done went by super fast. Look, you all share this.
Yes.
And you all
Click
need to like and
share.
follow us. We trying to do two things. We trying to give y'all information, and we also trying to take Conversations Art to the next level. Okay?
Building the brand. Building the brand.
Building the brand. And Tan just said there's strength in numbers. And I always tell people, every time we're a pack, y'all. The human race, we were designed to be in communication. And as soon as you wander off from the pack, you're more likely to be assaulted and attacked.
Mm-hmm.
So when is the next talk? Barbara Thomas is asking.
Well, he's gonna be here. Let me see. Once a month, he will be here. He will be here on April 21st.
April the 21st.
First, and then I'll give y'all a snippet. We're gonna be talking about depression, but I ain't gonna give y'all the name of it because Dr. Coleman came up with some of the cutesy names here for this. So it's about depression, okay?
Yeah.
Look, and I want y'all to go on YouTube or on your Apple, find you some meditation music. They got called anti-anxiety. Some of these apps. Download you some meditation apps and everything. Some calming music.
Right.
And sit on the porch like Val said. Sit on your porch.
Yeah,
enjoy
go
nature.
outside. Walk your neighborhood.
Make sure you have prayer.
There you go.
For sure. Prayer life.
Mm-hmm.
And that will lead you to the right doctor.
That's right.
In all thy ways acknowledge him, and he will direct your path. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, we have enjoyed having you on Conversation is Art. It is now time for us to sign off. Dr. Demel Coleman is
Enjoyed it.
Enjoyed it.
Enjoyed you, man. You are a smart brother. You taking in a new client? Anyway, I got your new call, man.
Tell him yes. Tell him you'll meet him on the street. You'll meet him on the street.
Hey, Demel, I like to cook. You can come over to the house and give me some counsel.
There you go.
All right, guys. Love y'all.
Yeah, well,
have a great one.
Take care. Look, you all, and practice self-care. Take care of yourself. So you're here to take care of others. You first.
That's right.
Have a good night. Bye-bye.